and the bishop got up there and said, I had this feeling last night as I was getting ready for bed, and I kind of put it off. And he said, but the feeling came back this morning, and I can't shake it. And he said, from this day on, you'll be known as Nektarios and not Evangelos.
Welcome back to the Missoula podcast, Nektarios Karantonis. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
So great having you. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I am too.
What brought you to Missoula?
So I am an Orthodox Christian priest, and so we are. Think of us a lot like the military. I kind of joke and say that Orthodox priests are like the spiritual soldiers of the earth, and so. Many times our hierarchy, our bishops can ask us to go to a different city, and we usually answer the call. Sometimes we say no, but in this case, I said yes. So a little bit over a year ago, I moved from Charlotte, North Carolina, and picked up my family, my wife and my two boys and our two dogs, and we went cross country from Charlotte, North Carolina to Missoula. And it's been such a whirlwind, but it's been really awesome.
How are you handling this recent weather here in the Northwest?
Well, that's what's funny. So I grew up in Chicago.
Oh, okay.
And so this is like nothing to me.
Okay.
Well, no, it's not like nothing, but it's still cold. But but I'm used to snow. I'm used to like all that stuff. And we got a nice like 5-year break in Charlotte while we were there. So we rarely got snow very much, but it was nice. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to be here. And so I'm here, and I serve at the only Greek Orthodox Church, the only Orthodox Church in Missoula. Closest Orthodox church here to us is also in Kalispell. And then a little bit further east of us, of course, Butte, Billings, all those places have Orthodox churches as well. But we're the only one here in Missoula. So I feel really blessed to be here and be able to serve here.
Born and raised in Chicago? Is that?
Yeah, I was born and raised in the suburbs of Chicago.
Okay.
I claim Chicago because no one knows where Addison, Illinois is.
Okay.
So
Cubs fan or White Sox?
Cubs all the way.
Okay.
All the way. I'm a North Sider.
Okay.
I don't hate Sox fans, but they're not the nicest people. So
That's what I hear.
Yeah.
So growing up, did you grow up in the Orthodox Church, or did this come later on in life?
So I was born into Orthodoxy. My parents were both Orthodox. They're both immigrants from Greece, came in the 60s, met in the 70s, got married. I'm the youngest of three. I have an older sister and older brother.
It sounds like the script of Mamma Mia.
Right, exactly. And so I grew up in the church. I was baptized as a baby. And what's interesting is I didn't really, until I went to seminary when I was like 18, I thought I knew all about my faith. I thought I knew all about Orthodoxy, and I was humbled quickly and learned a lot when I went to some of my first classes there. Like we had like a Orthodoxy 101 kind of thing to start off, just to get us the foundations of everything. And so I grew up Orthodox. I grew up in Chicago. Chicago is kind of steeped with Orthodox churches. There's probably like 30 within just what we call the Chicagoland area, the Chicago and its suburbs. So grew up really Greek. But then through seminary and things like that, of course, the church has adapted to a more English-speaking world in America. And so like our parish here in Missoula is predominantly in English. So we maybe repeat things in Greek once or twice for some of the older people. But yeah.
Can you give our listeners an Orthodox 101 as briefly as possible of what that even means?
Yeah, sure.
What's it mean to be Orthodox?
Right. So the Orthodox Church itself is the oldest part of the Christian church. It ties its roots back all the way to the apostles. So, and we have like obviously physical documentation of that. And through the apostles, the church was handed down from Christ to the apostles. The apostles then were sent out to make disciples of all nations. And historically, the Orthodox Church has remained the same, has through the ecumenical councils that happened throughout history, it remained the same in doctrine and hasn't really changed. There was never an Enlightenment period in the Orthodox Church, things like that. Of course, everybody knows that there's the Orthodox Church and there's the Catholic Church. There was the Great Schism that happened like in the 2nd century. And so, sorry, not in the 2nd century, in 1054. And so the Orthodox Church is a Trinitarian church, believes in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one God, three persons. We're a Christian, of course, so we follow Christ and his apostles. And being Orthodox kind of puts aside all of that, but being Orthodox is believing in the Trinity and following the commandments of Christ and being a follower of Christ at its very, very most basic form. So
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
What is the most common question that I like to say normals or normies ask you about what it's like to be an Orthodox priest, or what is the most common question you get?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, obviously people think, people know about the Catholic Church a little bit more. And number one question is like, do you guys get to get married as Orthodox priests? And the answer is yes. I think you heard me say earlier, I picked up my family, my wife and my 2 kids, and we moved out here. So that's a big difference. So our priests are allowed to get married. They don't have to get married. You can be a celibate priest in the Orthodox Church. But I am married. I have 2 kids. I have a 3rd one on the way too.
Congratulations.
Due in July.
Awesome.
Yeah. So
Boy,
we're really
girl?
excited.
Do we know
Another
yet?
boy.
3 boys.
Boy number 3, my poor wife.
Oh.
And we have 2 boy dogs too. So she's just surrounded and she's kind of come to terms with it. But we're really excited for that.
That's awesome.
So that's one of the most common questions. The other one is always like, well, what's the difference between you and the Catholic Church? There's always like a comparison between East and West. And I always tell them, it's historical, it's theological. It has to do with a lot of technical things like the procession of the Holy Spirit and things like that. And it can be confusing, but it's something that the church itself, the Christian church, is hopeful for unity one day, but we'll see when that happens, if it happens in our lifetime.
Take us back to Addison, Illinois. What was life like growing up there? What did your folks do?
Yeah, so Addison is a relatively small suburb of Chicago. It's straight west from the city. It's about 30 minutes from the city. Growing up there, my parents owned a restaurant, which is so common for Greek people, Greek immigrants especially, right? It wasn't a Greek restaurant per se. It was kind of like a steakhouse kind of thing.
Is that legal? They can do that?
I guess so.
Wow.
They can change that. Yeah, they can change what it is. But they owned it for 35 years. So that's kind of what brought them. They lived in the city when my brother and sister were younger. And then in like 84, they moved to the suburbs. They purchased the restaurant. They purchased their house there that they still live in there. And growing up there was, life was great. It was really quiet. It's funny. Missoula is a lot like where I grew up, minus the mountains, because the Midwest is just straight up flat. But Missoula kind of reminds me of home a little bit. And that's one of the things that I love about it. I had never visited Missoula before moving here. And I mean, I drove past, but, on I-90, but, yeah, growing up in Illinois was interesting. It's a lot different, and I've kind of lived all over the place in the country, and it's always been unique to see how different places are different, and the culture is different, and how people work and things like that.
Did you go to public school, private school?
Public school.
Public school?
Yeah.
When did you realize seminary ministry was for you, or growing up as a kid? What was a dream? What did you want to be growing up?
Yeah.
When did that change?
Yeah. So I had a few different wants, and like, again, with immigrant parents, they were like, we want you to be a doctor, and like it was like
Or a lawyer,
the struggle,
right?
yeah, or like something that like made money, right?
Yeah.
So the struggle was always like, am I going to make my parents happy and proud and things like that. But around the age of 10, which is funny, my oldest son is going to turn 10 in June. Around the age of 10, we took a trip to Greece. And we visited this island, the island of Aegina, which is about 2-hour boat ride off the coast of Athens. And it's a pretty small island, but it's there where anywhere you go in Greece, there are monasteries. There are places where saints have lived, where saints' bodies are laying, and we call them relics, the remains of their bodies, their bones and things like that. And actually the island we visited that year is where Saint Nektarios, my now patron saint, is. His body is laid there, and we visited this monastery, and I remember kind of stepping foot there and feeling this sense of peace and feeling this just different thing. And as a 10-year-old kid, it was hard. It's hard to explain it now, but I almost knew. And it wasn't until we went home that summer and school started again, and it was kind of random, but I was sitting on the couch. I remember the night exactly though. I was sitting on the couch doing some homework, and my parents were watching TV, and I looked up at them and I said, I think I want to be a priest when I grow up. And I remember the reaction was really positive. Like it was, they were really excited about that, and supportive. And I just remember from there on, and when I look back at it now, it's kind of like I never looked back. There was never a moment where I had any doubt of what I was going to do and where I was going to go in the future. And I feel like that was something that was God-given. It wasn't like something that I felt just myself. It was a calling. And we refer to it that way as priests, as seminarians. We say it's a calling from God, because I don't know any sane person who would want to do this, but it is the greatest blessing that I've ever encountered in my life. So you got to be a little bit crazy, but that's okay. I think that's how Christ picked his disciples. Is he didn't pick the people that were maybe fit into that exact mold of being a religious person or being a religious leader. He picked people that were outside of the norm. He picked fishermen, he picked tradesmen, he picked sinners, And so to me, not at the time, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm a sinner, I'm not worthy of this, all that. I think about that now and say, I'm not perfect, and I could be so much better, and I could be a better priest, I could be a better father, a better husband. But I know that he has made me worthy. He has picked me, not to be, egotistical about it. That's not how I look at it. I look at it humbly as I feel so blessed and so taken back that he has chosen me for this ministry. So that's how I take it. And so, going back to my calling at the age of 10, I also started to have this interest in this saint who I feel like was kind of present for this calling at the time when I was visiting Greece. And ever since then, and now I can look back on it and see it more, but ever since then, that saint has followed me. And that kind of leads to my name. And I don't know if you want to ask.
I was just going to ask you. I want to come back to the story, but yeah, your name.
Yeah.
Because am I correct that inside the Greek church, your name changes at some point along the journey?
Yeah. So when you're baptized, your name is usually the name that your parents choose for you. So when you're baptized, a lot of times your parents will choose a saint that, to name you after, essentially. Mm-hmm. So like my son is John. He's also named after my dad, but he's baptized to celebrate with St. John the Baptist. Okay. So like things like that. For me, I was baptized with my grandmother's name. My grandmother's name was Evangelia. And so my full name, my legal name was Evangelos. And I went by Evan growing up. But Evangelos it points to the feast day of the Annunciation, which is the feast the time when the angel Gabriel went to the Virgin Mary and told her that she would bear a son through the Holy Spirit, and it would be Christ. And so I grew up with the name Evangelos.
Is that like what's on birth certificate?
Yep.
Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. And when I went through college and everything, and seminary, and graduated grad school at 25, and went into ministry. Was like a youth director and like lay person, lay assistant at a couple of churches first for a few years. And in 2018, it was time for me to be ordained to the diaconate. So you become a deacon before you're a priest in the Orthodox Church. And it's there where your bishop, who does the ordaining, does the sacrament, has the option to change your name. Now, in the tradition of the church, it's usually done for the name change thing only happens for clergy that is celibate. Don't ask me why. It's just a tradition. It's, it's what they do. But the bishop has the option to do that no matter what. And a lot of times priests will talk to their bishop about it and say, I have this closeness with a saint or something like that. I'd really like to change my name to this. If they're becoming a priest and maybe they were a convert and they don't have a traditional Orthodox name, that might be the case. For me, it wasn't. It was like I had a very traditional name. Evangelos it's a very common Greek name. And so the day of my ordination came, and there's a certain part of the service. It happens within what we call the Divine Liturgy. Compare it to the Mass of like the Catholic Church, right? So the Eucharistic service that we have on Sundays. And it came to that point of there's a point in the service where the candidate speaks to the bishop directly, and then the bishop kind of counsels him back, kind of talking about the life you're going into, the ministry, your responsibilities, things like that you're going to encounter both spiritually and, practically. And we hadn't talked about it. And the bishop got up there and said, I had this feeling last night as I was getting ready for bed, and I kind of put it off. And he said, but the feeling came back this morning, and I can't shake it. And he said, from this day on, you'll be known as Nektarios and not Evangelos. And you'll go forth in your ministry with this name, with this great saint. And I could go into the saint's story, but I would encourage you guys and all of your listeners to Google him, because his story is amazing. There was a movie made about him in the last couple of years called Man of God. It was in theaters. It's out there to watch too. I highly encourage that. It's really well done. But from then on, from 2018, so I was 29 at the time, I became then Deacon Nektarios and then Father Nektarios about a year later, when I was ordained to the priesthood in Charlotte, my first Sunday there. And the saint has followed us in our lives ever since, me and my wife. And he's really been active. He's guided us. We've served at 2 churches that were named after him by coincidence. And it's just been such a blessing. And even here in Missoula, like, we have parishioners that have really, really deep connections with him. And he's a saint that we pray to for people who have cancer. He's been known to do many miracles for people who have cancer. And so it's a really beautiful ministry. I feel like I have huge shoes to fill that I will never fill with him. But it's a blessing for me to carry his name. It's also kind of cool to be able to evangelize to people a little bit with my name and be like, hey, this is who it is. And take a look at who he is and
so
his life.
When your wife gets upset with you, what name does she call you?
She still calls me Ev.
Does she?
Yeah.
It's Ev.
Around the house. Even sometimes at church, she slips up and she's like, Ev. I'm like, but it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all happy. And my family too. My family sometimes still calls me Evan, but I'm like,
That's awesome. I want to come back to your story and jump in, but before we do, let's go to our rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
These are always fun. You had mentioned that you came to Missoula because of the ministry from Charlotte, but when you got to Missoula, what was that first initial memory?
So it's funny, getting to Missoula, when I visited Missoula in December 23, kind of to feel out the parish a little bit, feel like if I was really sure I wanted to come here. And my first memory here was we were sitting at, I was sitting with the parish council of the church at dinner one night, and we were at the Chow Mambo restaurant over there on Higgins. And it was the evening, and it just started snowing like crazy. And there was no snow on the ground at first. And then it just in a matter of an hour, there was just a ton of snow. I mean, it felt like a ton of snow, but it wasn't. But I have a previous memory actually of Missoula, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, of driving through. So in 2015, we went from Boston, where the seminary is, where Holy Cross is. And our first assignment was in Southern California. And my wife's from Seattle. So we took the opportunity to drive Boston to Seattle first, stop there, and then Seattle down to LA.
Interstate 90 the whole way from start to finish.
And then I-5 down.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so we, on our way through with I-90, I remember we had, our 10-year-old now was a newborn, and we were driving through. We saw signs from Missoula and things like that. We'd heard of it, and we looked around. We were kind of like, I could think I could live here one day, maybe, and seeing the mountains and things like that. But never did I think 10 years later we would actually be here.
Crazy.
So it's kind of crazy. So that's kind of like my first memory, really. But the other one is kind of my first memory of really living here in the last year. What's
your favorite coffee spot in Missoula?
So by the church, we have Clyde Coffee, but my daily go-to is Luz Caboose, and it's the one up on North Reserve. I have to shout out to the baristas there, because we go there every morning after dropping off the kids. It's just good. We like getting it. And I'm the kind of guy that today it's 20 below or whatever, I still get iced coffee every day. So I'm an iced coffee guy.
Awesome.
I don't drink hot coffee a whole lot.
What is your favorite restaurant?
Are we talking lunch or dinner, or does it matter? Just general.
Your choice.
It's actually, I have to shout out my guys at Ambrosia. Ambrosia is my favorite. Achilles and his two brothers there are really great, and they're huge. And I'm not just shouting them out because they're parishioners or anything like that. Their food is really good, and I love Greek food, and it makes me nostalgic for Chicago, and because Chicago has so many spots, so many Greek spots, so many like all of that.
Do you wish there was more Greek food in Missoula, or do you feel like we have a good?
I feel like we have a good that's like kind of lunchy.
Yeah.
I don't always go to places like that for dinner. I feel like I wish we had like a nice Greek dinner sit down restaurant.
I mean, I could probably eat at number one Gyros daily.
I could too.
Their fries,
I love both of them.
Their fries are unreal.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Unreal.
It's right by the church, right on Fifth Street.
Ambrosia, solid. They're both. I wish we had more Greek options.
I hear you. Well, we have the Greek Fest in June, so you got to come by.
Absolutely. Done.
What is the weirdest thing about Missoula to you?
So I was looking at this. I was thinking about this. I'm like, what is the weirdest thing? And my first go-to was like, all this snow, but barely any snow plows was one of the things. The other one was just like how easy it is to feel at home here. Honestly, like, I don't know if it's the people, if it's just the city itself. We just felt at home right away. And we've only been here for a year, but it feels like we've been here for 10, and we're so comfortable here. And we really were hoping to be here for the long haul. Like, I keep telling my parishioners, I'm like, I want to retire here in 30 years, So hopefully that's in the cards for us. And that's kind of what I feel like. It's not really weird, I guess, but
What do you love the most about Missoula?
Oof. I gotta say, I love the mountains. Yeah. Love the river, like just the beauty of Montana itself. I honestly never thought I was going to live in this state. And so this is like a bucket list thing for me. And being able to live here is just awesome. Like, that's a dream.
Is there a particular book that's made an impact on your life more than others?
I would say so. Beyond like the book about the life of my saint has really made an impact, which is called Saint Nektarios, the saint of our century, because he is a really recent saint. He was made a saint in 1961. Something recently I've been reading is called, oh shoot, no, I forgot what it's called. Gosh, I guess it's not that influential. I forgot what it is. It's morning something. Anyway, I'm trying to become a morning person, and I'm thinking with a newborn baby coming, it's probably going to happen. It's going to have to happen sooner or later. Maybe this third try is the best opportunity, but those two are really influential in my life. Yeah.
I want to pick back up on your story. Graduate high school, take off to seminary, and I'm piecing it all together. You went to Boston. Is that correct?
Yes.
Holy Cross.
Yes.
Was that the only option for seminary in the U.S. or are there?
So
how'd you land on Holy Cross?
Yeah. So Holy Cross also has an undergraduate program. So it's two schools, one campus. It's called Hellenic College. And so I went straight out of high school, went to Hellenic College. The option is you can go to any college and then go there for Holy Cross and have a 4-year program in theology and things like that and do your seminary years. Or if you do all the years there, it knocks off a year because you kind of intertwine with classes and things like that. So I was there for 7 years. But it is the only accredited Orthodox Christian school in the United States. There are other seminaries in the same breath. There are a couple in New York. But that is the Greek Orthodox seminary in the United States. So it's pretty much where you're going to go. So if you're sure about it, that's where you go.
And is that where you met your wife?
It is where Boston? I met my wife. Yeah. So she was doing an undergrad program in the same school in Hellenic College for elementary education. She finished her degree. She came the year after me. So I was a sophomore. She was a freshman when we met. We met over, we do a flag football game every year between the undergrad and the graduate school. And so we met over flag football kind of. I came back from like a practice. We were like makeshift practice we were having. And she was like, hey, you want to throw the football around? And we just kind of organically had that conversation.
And here you are years later with 3 kids.
Yeah. Almost 12 years of marriage later. Yeah.
So when you graduated school, the church said, all right, we're sending you to Southern Cal. Like,
so it kind of
just happened that quick or
no. So it's when you graduate, you typically go back to where you're from geographically. Okay. And so within the Orthodox Church, like in America, the country is divided up into 9 kind of geographic areas. We call them metropolises, and there's a bishop for each of those. And so I was, coming from Chicago, you would have thought that I would have gone back to Chicago, found a parish there, gotten hired, things like that. But what ended up happening was I have a friend, he's still there, who's the priest in Long Beach, California at the Greek Orthodox Church there. And he called me up and he was like, hey, we've never had a youth director before. We've never had an assistant priest before, a second priest. I'd love to bring you out here, kind of try that out, see what happens, whatever. So
in Long Beach,
yes, California. Please. Yeah. Right. So I was like, I'm going from Boston of 7 years of like feet of snow and nor'easters and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I would love to come to Long Beach. And we went and checked out the church beforehand and it was like amazing. So I was like, yeah. So that was how we got our first gig there. We spent a year there. Their parish decided to not continue with a youth director after that. So it was like, okay, fine. And I moved on. And so we went from there to Seattle. We spent some time with my in-laws for like 6 months, just trying to, in the interim, find something. I still wasn't a priest yet. So it was a little bit different for me. I kind of had to go searching for my own thing. And then I got a call from Chicago from the bishop there. And he's like, hey, I'd love to have you come out here. We'll find you a parish to work at and then slowly work you towards ordination. And that's what happened. So we picked up and moved from Long Beach to Seattle to Chicago again. Well, we were there for 2 years. And then towards the end of that 2 years is when I was made a deacon and then given the opportunity to go to Charlotte, which was a whole nother blessing.
Do you have aspirations to move into a bishop role?
No. So yeah. So as a priest, only our celibate priests can become bishops. Okay. So I will never be a bishop. That I've kind of chosen my way of life, being married, and I'm happy with that. Okay. I would never want to be on that level of leadership. Because our bishops are really are looked at as shepherds. They are like Christ as shepherding his people. And we work with his blessing as priests on his behalf, on their behalf, on the church's behalf, and with his blessing. So
what would you say is one of the, I guess, largest misconceptions about Greek Orthodoxy, the church,
sure,
being a Greek priest?
Huge thing that we hear about in like Protestantism, things like that, is they're concerned about how we have icons, right? So we have images of saints, images of Christ, images of the Virgin Mary, and that we venerate them. So, and the misconception is that we worship them, right? So number one is we don't worship saints. We don't worship the Virgin Mary. We only worship God. We worship Christ, of course, because he is part of the Trinity. He is God. And so the misconception is that we are venerate. When we say venerate, like we kiss our icons. When we venerate, that we're worshiping an idol, essentially a piece of wood with paint on it. And that's not what our theology is at all on icons. And the church went through this in history, by the way. In the 9th century, there was iconoclasm where the entire Byzantine Empire removed icons because they were looked at in this way. And then the Seventh Ecumenical Council happened, affirming the theology of icons and restoring icons in the church and being able to say that because Christ came incarnate, became a human being, we can depict him in images. And in the history of the church, iconography was huge for education because scripture wasn't broadly translated and many people weren't educated enough to read it at the time, where images were able to be used as teaching tools. And it's still that sense today. I still teach our children in our church and everything with iconography, even our adults who don't know things about the tradition of iconography and things like that. I would say that's a huge misconception, and I'm glad I could address that because a lot of people have a hard time with it.
What qualifies someone as a saint? You said you're saint just in the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
Like when does someone become a saint?
Right. So there are different things. And I know that in the Western church and in Catholicism, things like that, there are qualifying things like they have to, miracles have to be attributed to them after they die and things like that. Generally in the Orthodox Church, there are some signs a lot of times that are found about people and whether they'll be a saint or not. And so I'll give you an example of my saint, right? So he died in 1920. He died in a hospital, but immediately a miracle happened. Not that, again, that's a qualifying factor for anything, but he was sharing a room, and this is actually depicted in the movie too. He was sharing a room with a man who was in a terrible accident, was paralyzed from the waist down. And when the saint died, they took off some of his clothing and they put it on the bed next to him where the man was laying, and the man actually got up and started walking. That's one sense, but also for him, after his funeral, he was buried in a normal sense. They when they think that a person may have lived a saintly life, they'll exhume the body, especially when they're a monk, a monastic saint. They'll exhume the body and look and see if it's been incorrupt. So incorrupt meaning it hasn't decayed, it hasn't had any signs of decomposing. And for him, that was an example. They exhumed his body a year, 2 years, 3 years after, and his body was still intact. And in fact, they had laid flowers in the casket with him. And the first year that they exhumed his body, those flowers were still alive. A year later, in the coffin, or in the coffin with him, in the tomb with him. So signs like those are kind of signs, but also we know that the Holy Spirit from Pentecost has never stopped working in the world. Christ said that the Holy Spirit would always be with us, and that's why we continue to have saints. We have modern day saints, even from the last few years. We had a woman saint from Alaska who was glorified last year and made a saint, Saint Olga. So we also have American saints too, which is amazing. It's amazing to think that that God is working and that the Holy Spirit is working even here in America.
When you say, excuse me, even here in America, what is that like being an Orthodox father in America? Is there some sense of persecution, might be too hard of a word, but just some opposition to what you guys are trying to accomplish?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Christianity itself, Orthodox Christianity, is countercultural. And there is a lot of negativity out there. But I would say there's far more interest right now in the Orthodox Church. In my 1 year here in Missoula, just over a year, it was December, our church has tripled in size, which is a telltale sign that people are interested in Orthodoxy. Right now I have 30 people coming into, I do a class like twice a year, called Becoming Orthodox. And I have a class of 30 right now that have just come in and are interested in the church and eventually hopefully becoming Orthodox by the grace of God. But as a dad, it's, as a parent in general, as an Orthodox Christian parent, we look at our role as trying to raise saints, essentially. So we're trying to impart on them their faith, strengthen their faith, and being sure that it is true and it is alive in their life. And with two boys, they're constantly with me. They're constantly like they're serving with me in the altar as altar boys. And that's just the blessing of it. Is being an Orthodox Christian is not about reading about it in books. It's not even about just being physically present. It's about living your entire life. It's not just what happens in the bounds of the church. It's everything that's every part of our life outside of the church, outside of the walls. And it encompasses your whole life. It's not just your identity, but it's everything that you are. Yeah.
What do you, sorry.
No, it's okay.
All right.
Yeah, I might not be. What do you attribute this renewed interest in Orthodoxy? Because when I think about it, obviously for those listening, they can't see you but it can see you on YouTube. You got the black robe and the chain, and you have a collar. No, is that?
I don't today. Sometimes I wear a collar, but generally this is how you'll see me.
Yeah. So, which is awesome. But I think a lot of people would attribute to that, oh, that's kind of old style or
kind of intimidating on the street. No, not sure how to approach you or what.
I laugh because I get a lot of funny looks on the streets.
Yeah.
And my wife a lot of times will be like, he's a priest. He's a priest. Like,
you're not a goth.
I'm like, gosh, you're a savage. Like, I just keep walking. And she's like, she sees people give me looks and she's like, he's a priest, guys. That's why I always make sure I have a cross on so people know at least that I'm a priest. But yeah, it's, it is old school. I mean, it's old school because it's the oldest church, it's been around for like 2000 years. But I don't dress like this to get attention. I dress like this because it's who I am. I'm a priest, right? And that's important to me. And it's important for me for people to kind of get used to that. And in a city like Missoula, where we're not enormous, I like to go around dressed like this because it's also an opportunity to start a conversation and be like, hey, and I have had great conversations. It's not all weird looks. A lot of times, like I'll go to the good food store and sit down for lunch with my wife and my kids or whatever. And people come up to me and like, hey, are you a priest? Or like, hey, can we talk or whatever? And it's really cool. Yeah, it's a nice thing. I've thought about doing things like going to a coffee shop, and like I have friends who have like brought little signs with them that are like, have coffee with an Orthodox priest, and like you just sit there all day and people can come sit down with you, people can just chat and stuff like that. So maybe when the weather's warmer and I can sit outside, maybe I'll do something like that.
Like that meme, the guy at the table, like change my mind.
Yeah, exactly. I am Orthodox
Christian.
Christian. Change my mind.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So you said that you love Missoula. You want to retire here eventually. What is the big vision for the Orthodox Church here in Missoula for you in the near future?
Yeah. So we, like I said, I told you earlier, we've tripled in size. We're kind of bursting at the seams in the church that we have. We have like 120 people consistently on Sundays, which is more than we can seat. We have seating for probably about 80 or 90 right now. So it's like standing room only right now. We do own property on West Central Avenue, like 5 acres, and we've thought about building there, but we're also really attached to where we are. So we're trying to look and see if we can expand our footprint where we are and create a more traditional looking Orthodox church. So what we have now, by the way, is what we've been in for next year will be 70 years.
70?
Yeah. So our church in Missoula is almost 70 years old. And the building itself is like almost 100 years old. So it's creaky, it's old, we're doing the best that we can with what we have right now, but we're hoping to expand and like raise the funds and do all that stuff to be able to have a traditional, beautiful Orthodox temple here in Missoula and just a beacon of Christianity.
Question for you off subject.
Yeah.
A lot of people here in Montana, seems like I'm hearing more conversations, love to vacation in Greece. And
who doesn't?
Like, where are the go-to spots that only the locals know about? Like, yeah, we get, Athens and the Parthenon, like all that, the touristy.
Yeah.
But like, what do people need to do when they visit Greece?
Well, I would say, I haven't been to Greece in 20 years, which is so sad because I used to go like every summer as a kid, but then college happened, marriage happened, babies happened. We were planning to go this year. Obviously, baby happened, so can't go. But yeah, Athens kind of touristy. The islands are always a good bet. The islands are like amazing, beautiful. You really can't go wrong with any of the islands. There are touristy islands, like Santorini is kind of touristy. I've heard the island of Crete is beautiful. It's like the biggest island on the way south of Greece. Any of the islands are really beautiful. My family is from the like lower peninsula of the Peloponnese, so we used to go there. We didn't go we went to a lot of beaches, but we had to drive a considerable amount, but I wouldn't recommend that. But any island I would say is amazing. Yeah.
I just got one last question for you, Nektarios. If a young person, maybe not as young as you were, 10 years old, but has some interest in going down this route and feels this call to go and become a priest, Orthodox, what advice would you give them on maybe not the same mistakes that you made, or maybe just being aware of what the cost is?
Yeah. I would say, don't worry about the mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen, whether we like it or not. But make the best of the mistakes, because everywhere we've been, I'll tell you, our ping pong or our pinball has been Boston, LA, Seattle, Chicago, Charlotte, Missoula. So you can see we just haven't been to like Texas yet. And I don't think we want to go there. It's that mistakes are going to happen. Every single experience you have can be made positive. Even if it's a bad experience, you learn and better yourself off of it. And that's what we feel like we've done, my wife and I. And for us, it's, we're a team. We're not, it's not father's the priest and his wife is just along for the ride. She's as much a part of my ministry as I am. And she works just as hard as I do at the parish, which is amazing. I'm so thankful for that because without her help, I don't know where I would be. We don't have staff, things like that. So it really comes down to us and all of the initiatives and things that we do. And of course our parishioners and our volunteers. But for someone who is exploring, maybe wanting to become an Orthodox priest, it's just being encouraging because the world probably doesn't want that. And I say like the world at large, but like the worldly view doesn't want more priests, doesn't want Orthodoxy spreading. And so just doing it and knowing that whatever experiences you have are going to be good, whether you know it yet or not. You will have negative things to say or negative experiences, but they turn out to be positive, like everything in the world. So
my last question for you, if we'll just say Reserve Street billboard, you were able to say one thing on there to the city of Missoula or an image or what would you say if you had an opportunity to speak into the lives of everybody in Missoula?
Come and see is what I would say. Just like Christ said to people, come and see, and come and see the Orthodox Church. Come and visit us. Just come experience it. I mean, everyone is welcome. Yes, we have a Greek flag outside and it says Greek on our sign, but it is not a club for Greek people. I would say the minority of our people are Greek, and it's a welcoming place. And we might have a billboard one day. So I'm hoping that people, your listeners especially, I'm hoping that they just come and see what we're about. And we're not just a Greek fest, but we're a community of faithful people following Christ's commandments. And if that's something that people are interested, they can definitely come and visit us.
Sorry, I lied. One more question.
Okay.
Greek Fest.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. What is Greek Fest?
Greek Fest is the cultural side of our church, but it also includes the church too. Greek Fest happens in June. This year it's June 21st and 22nd, Friday, Saturday. Food, music. The sweets are the best, the pastries, things like that. But we also do daily church tours, talk about Orthodoxy. It's me doing the tours throughout the day. It's just a fun time. It takes place right there on our property. We close off part of the street there, and we have Greek dance performers, like actual real, I would call them professionals. But then we have like music and it's awesome. It's from 12 to 9 every day, and we invite everyone to come. We want everyone to come.
Awesome.
All right, we'll see you at Greek Fest.
We'll see you there.
Yes, come on. Wait, I want to see you on a Sunday beforehand, though.
Ooh.
Come see me on a Sunday. That's the invitation.
Okay.
I'm throwing down the gauntlet.
Awesome. Father, thank you so much for coming in. Fascinating conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so
Grateful
much.
for you and the impact you're making on our community, and wish you all the best moving forward.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks for having me, and I wish you guys all the best too. I can't wait to see the episode.
Cool.
What's up, Missoula? This is Nick Balla, producer of the Missoula podcast. We truly appreciate you hanging out with us as we dive into the stories that make our city special. If you could do us a quick favor and follow the show wherever you are listening, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, maybe you're watching on YouTube, so hit that little subscribe button. It really helps us out. Head on over to www.themissoulapodcast.com for more information, and we'll see you next week.